Hi, and welcome to Class 14 of Science Fiction Filmmaking 101. In this class, I'm going to talk about how I use screen graphics in my science fiction films. There are two core aspects to screen graphics, and those are design and storytelling. When both work hand in hand on the screen, the graphics will be able to tell a story and convey information to the audience in a visually engaging way, which is exactly the approach I took in all of my movies to avoid the need for any exposition dialogue, but instead push for a more visual narrative approach to telling some of the key aspects of the story and the plot. So with the Beyond, I worked with a talented motion designer to create some of the key standalone sequences, which will eventually help convey the technicalities and science of things such as interstellar space travel. Now, I wanted something that was technical yet pleasing to the eye, but at the same time, the audience shouldn't feel overwhelmed with the science and technical jargon or aspects that are presented in the visual theories. I also used those animated sequences to support what the actor was saying, which helped break up the talking heads interview footage, making the editorial more exciting and engaging to watch. Another sequence in the Beyond which benefited with motion design shots was the science behind the Human 2.0s, and that needed to be as clear as possible that the process was about transplanting a human brain into a synthetic body, and I wanted to show this as opposed to telling. So this was a good example of repurposing the CGI asset which was used for the photoreal scenes to be able to be used in motion design shots like this. Now, the big component in all of my science fiction films is how screen graphics are integrated into the set or location and then shot as part of the footage to tell the story. These are often referred to in the science fiction filmmaking world as FUI, which stands for Future User Interface. This would play a crucial role with showing the audience what the characters are seeing and how they are receiving or reacting to a situation, whilst also revealing more plot points as the story unfolds. In a dramatic scene in the Beyond, I used future user interfaces to reveal certain psychological emotions from the characters, whilst also making it clear to the audience that their interviews were being monitored in a very high-tech approach. This actually painted a picture of how intense the candidate selection process is in the story and how high the stakes are. Now, the design of the interface used thin lines and sparse text to avoid any over-cluttering of the view of the actor's performance. Speaking of emotions, for my second movie, Origin Unknown, I went with a simple yet universally recognized approach to showing emotion, and that's using colors, as well as the intensity of pulsating lights on the front screen of the robot's face. I did this to convey how the AI was feeling and to give the impression that it's a sentient being. For both of my films, I captured the graphics in camera, meaning I played back the graphics in real time on the set. Not only did this make the set and locations look really cool and provided depth and layers to the environment, but it also helped the actors with their performance by referring to the graphics in front of them and reacting to it. This, of course, would mean I need to create all the graphics way in advance and then play them back on the day as part of setting up the shots. All the graphics will be created to be looped seamlessly, and I would always punch up their saturation more than usual in order for the camera to pick up the screen clearly in the shots. With both of these films, I also used the screen graphics as part of the art direction and lighting of the set, to really create that futuristic look and style which is so consistent with all my science fiction films. Now, before any actual design takes place, the first thing I do is always break down the script into scenes which require screen graphics, whether it's a standalone sequence or an integrated shot with screens on the set for the actors to react to and interact with. Once I've done the script breakdown, I then start doing mini storyboards to provide direction of what needs animating and what information I want to convey on the screen and at which portion of the screen I want to show this at. The next step was to then construct the graphics using Adobe Illustrator or Photoshop before bringing them into Adobe After Effects. So in this example of my short film Sync, I wanted to create the screen graphics of what would appear as a heads-up display of the Sync's visor, but also what its POV would look like. So as you can see in this After Effects project, There are tons and tons of layers used to create the look, and also the timing of each keyframed animation to bring it all alive and hit the key points of the scene editorially. It's also worth labeling your layers if these files are to be shared with a team of artists using these assets and files to make the scenes. For Origin Unknown, we combined wireframe schematics with design to show things that were just too expensive to do for real. So, in a way, I use screen graphics as a device to be able to convey to the audience what I was trying to do without the cost of shooting something or creating a photorealistic CG sequence that would have been very expensive to do. I did this for things such as providing a close-up angle of the rover leaving the probe or the probe landing. Even things like establishing the rover arm technology, which in reality we only built to move in a restricted way for real. So by showing the wireframe of this before cutting to the actual real model really helped sell the scene more. And because we're seeing this from her point of view, what I did was set up a third unit shoot where it was me and a cinematographer, and we would play back each graphics on a large screen and then shoot those graphics back in camera in a very loose floating style, or sometimes just locked off at 4K so that I can punch in if needed. I also shot them with very tight and often creative obscure angles and playing with the lens focus to give the illusion that this is from her point of view and is an intimate moment of her processing what she's seen on those screens to determine her next action in the scene. This actually made the graphics part of the cinematography of the film, and therefore never feels like a graphics moment to the audience, which is important considering all of my stories are supposed to be grounded and driven by the characters. The budget for screen graphics was very little in my projects and often part of the overall VFX budget. So how did I do it? Well, firstly, I only hire a designer to come in to create the design, the look and the style guide of the graphics, which is the most time consuming but also important thing to nail down creatively. Once this was done, the designer would provide me as part of its deliverables a package of assets such as fonts, a layout of how the components sit on screen, and all the lines and all the individual animated components, all in a nicely packaged After Effects file. Now, usually I would then have a motion designer animate some of the key scenes, but most of the time I bash out so many screen graphics myself on the fly and when I need them, which means I don't have to hire a team of people every time I have a bunch of new shots to do, since I can just use a kit bash approach to do them myself with the assets, or I could even task a capable edit assistant to put them together as part of the editorial process. And of course, with the assets being in my library, I can always use them for my other projects by just tweaking the fonts, changing the text, colors and layout a little, without the need to design and create components from scratch.